Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about Dungeons & Dragons in its 21st year of history, 1994. So we're chugging along, and we're in the early 90s at this point. And we're going to talk specifically about the 21st year, 1994, 21st year of Dungeons & Dragons history, through the catalyst of CLEAR. Through the acronym of CLEAR: Catalyst, Location, Entity, Artifact, and Relationship. So who is the catalyst for Dungeons & Dragons in 1994? Well, the catalyst for Dungeons & Dragons in 1994 is Brian Sean Perry. Now, he is a game designer, and he is the game designer specifically on World of Indiana Jones. So in 1994, we see a brand new tabletop role-playing game called World of Indiana Jones. And World of Indiana Jones is important to Dungeons & Dragons because it is another declaration that licensing is important to tabletop role-playing games, and licensing would be very important to Dungeons & Dragons for the entirety of its game length, right? So Dungeons & Dragons itself will have well over 100 licenses attached to it, in its entire life. It will be attached to all types of products, from toys to miniatures to dice to fantasy novels, even to clothing apparel, sneakers. Like, they're literally well over 100 different licenses will be attached to Dungeons & Dragons. And here, with the World of Indiana Jones, we have a very popular film that is being captured as a freestanding core rulebook, right? Which is adding to that momentum of Dungeons & Dragons, saying that the industry that Dungeons & Dragons has created, we really don't even know how large it is, right? And the reason why is Indiana Jones is one of the absolute largest adventure films in the history of all mankind, right? Like all humankind. It's huge, right? And here we have this Indiana Jones tabletop role-playing game. Well, one of the things is, again, and it's deepening the connection between Dungeons & Dragons and Steven Spielberg, right? And it also is connecting. It's also making a connection from the perspective of licensing for films and stories, right? So at this point, they're really in 1994. There's no telling how far this will go. Like, for instance, at this point also, tabletop role-playing games overall tabletop role-playing games are being made for all kinds of different properties, not simply adventure properties. So the question comes up: what percentage of films and novels are going to be converted into tabletop role-playing games? And this is a big question. Now, in 1994, that opportunity seems limitless. It really seems like there's like hardly even, you can even apply a limit to how many properties tabletop role-playing games can be applied to, because at this point in 1994, in the 21st year of Dungeons & Dragons, tabletop role-playing games overall have a very strong trajectory, and Dungeons & Dragons is doing pretty much better than it's ever done, right? It's doing extremely well as far as sales and things. There are some problems. There are starting to creep forward some problems with the business structure of TSR overall. And also, of course, Dungeons & Dragons has some weaknesses to technology and how technology is changing the world. But the reality is, licensing is a big part of that. And Brian Sean Perry is bringing forward a game in World of Indiana Jones that can be played. Now, the reality is, Brian Sean Perry is a catalyst for Dungeons & Dragons in his accomplishment of bringing Indiana Jones to a structured tabletop role-playing game. The game was actually not that great, right? And so one of the things, too, that we're dealing with is, in video games today, there's a term called shovelware, right? It's arguable that the Indiana Jones game was in some ways shovelware, in that it was, okay, we have this licensed property, we could slap a TRPG sticker on this, and this is going to sell really well. This is just purely my opinion. I don't think Brian Sean Perry did a great job of delivering the absolute best quality on that game, because I don't think there was a sense that they needed to, right? And also they were like, oh, what's the next movie? We can do another one. We can do another one. We can do another one, right? So licensing is a big deal in 1994. I also want to just take a moment to say, I don't think licensing is done for tabletop role-playing games. I don't think it's really been determined at all what the true future and true shape for licensing is for tabletop role-playing games, because tabletop role-playing games linked to licensing is very strange. I think it gives a lot of panache to any intellectual property a tabletop role-playing game is connected to, but there's a lot of risk because it invites people to tell stories with characters and elements of the setting, right? And so from a copyright perspective, tabletop role-playing games are kind of a nightmare for an intellectual property. But from connecting your brand to incredibly intelligent, creative, artistic, and often well-to-do people, having a TRPG is a really good idea. So there's a little bit of a connection there, right? Okay. So what is our location here in 1994? Our location is Gateway Station in St. Louis, Missouri. So Gateway Station in St. Louis, Missouri it's a railroad hub, okay? So it's actually literally a railroad yard where, trains come in, and it's a major railway station where trains arrive and depart all day, right? And there's literally many trains coming in and out of the station, right? So we want to talk about railroads and Dungeons and Dragons, right? So here this location is within the U.S., a large major railroad station, right, where regional rail and even national rail go in and out, right? And one of the things that we're seeing here is, at this point, in the 21st year of Dungeons & Dragons, there are games that are meeting every single week. There are actually even games that are playing multiple times a week, right? But at scale, in 1994, we have so many different types of games that one of the things that we're seeing is we have games that are once every 2 weeks, once a month, right? And one of the things, too, that we see is in the U.S., there's people... so one of the things that's really amazing about Dungeons & Dragons is Dungeons & Dragons, because it's all fantasy-based, because everybody's meeting at a table, it really breaks down a ton of boundaries, right? Like a ton of... So really, multiple genders will play at the table, multiple generations will play at the table, and multiple wealth classes will play. Multiple people with different amounts of monetary funds will play. And that's where the rail comes in, right? So regional rail and metropolitan transportation, right? Buses and trains, that kind of thing, right? Allow people who don't even own a car to begin playing in the suburbs or coming from the suburbs and playing in the city. Like, it allows this growth of different people sitting at the table to continue. So railroads are important in that. So especially regional rail, right? Where you can get a few tickets for under $10 and you can, go 20 miles out, right? And then at the end of the day, come 20 miles back. That allows games to exist that didn't exist before. Not in high numbers, but even a few. And it's important because Dungeons & Dragons is incredibly important for the boundaries it helps to break down. And railroads were important for breaking that down as well. Now, the railroad is important for Dungeons & Dragons for one more reason. And the reason why is Dungeons & Dragons is a very odd, very odd product in that what it accomplished in its point in time and its relationship to the future, to technology, right? And this was absolutely an open question in 1994, and this really remains an open question in 2019. So what was happening was Dungeons & Dragons comes out in 1974, and it is a print product. It is a print product. It is a book, which is very important, and saying, hey, this is a book that we have. We're going to create this. We're going to create this book, and you're going to write your character sheets on pen and paper, and we're going to draw maps on paper, right? And really, in 1974, computers are really not part of the game at all, right? It is a print product with pen and paper being used to track character sheets and do everything that's necessary to run the game. You do not need a single computer. But in 1994, there are video games based on Dungeons & Dragons, and people are starting to use desktops in running Dungeons & Dragons. There are computer programs that are being used to calculate how many hit points should this monster have if we adjust for this or that, or if I'm moving them from this setting to this setting, right? And so computers are starting to become part of the game, right? So one of the things that in 1994 that we're seeing is Dungeons & Dragons is saying, well, how do we use technology to make the game better? How and also, can we just run all of this electronically? Do we even need all this print medium, right? So and in 1994, everybody's really excited about computers. Now in 2019, we've reached a point where it has already Dungeons & Dragons has gone to the point where it's saying, you know what? The fact that our cool rule book for every single edition, including 5th edition, the edition right now is sold first and foremost as an 8.5 by 11, a little larger hardback book, and that you need 3 print books that cost $150, that this is a dedicated print medium with paper and pencil. One of the things that is still making paper and pencil still usable, still relevant, still cool, right? So the point where in 1994, they're saying, do we need paper and pencil? And now in 2019, Dungeons & Dragons is saying, we are the last vestiges of making print medium like vinyl, like super cool, super edgy, like really a nuanced, artistic. We're using paper because we can, right? And in my opinion, the lamest people are playing on laptops, right? It's just like, yeah, you can do that, but the cool people over here, we're buying these books because they're still being printed, and they're one of the coolest things that are still being printed, and there's good reason to keep printing them. And Dungeons & Dragons will always be, Dungeons & Dragons can be the reason why print never leaves, right? And so that question is happening. What's that got to do with railroads? Railroads are exactly the same in America, right? We are like, railroads are precious. They are an incredibly important part of our history. We use them every single day. But guess what? You sure as heck aren't going to build any new ones, right? Because it's incredibly difficult to do, and we can barely keep the ones that we have going, right? So, like, maybe on the East Coast you'll get, like, a super fast train every now and then. But generally, railroads are being preserved, and we understand the value of them, but they're like pretty heavily subsidized, right? And they're not really, they're this product that is out of time. What is the railroad's relationship to technology? That question is exactly the same being asked for Dungeons & Dragons and for railroads. So they're bound together. And so in 1994, Gateway Station in St. Louis, Missouri is connected to Dungeons & Dragons and is enabling people to play together that normally wouldn't be able to play together. Who is our entity for 1994? Our entity for 1994 is Gordon Ramsay. Now, at this point, Gordon Ramsay is the head chef in Chelsea, England, right? And this is really near at the very beginning of his career. Now, the reason why it's important to point out Gordon Ramsay coming up in 1994 is Gordon Ramsay will absolutely change the landscape of food for every single Dungeons & Dragons player during their lifetime, right? And the reason why is Gordon Ramsay will catapult food into the entertainment industry, and he will be a big part of the Food Network, right? Like an entire channel just dedicated to food. Gordon Ramsay will be part of the success of Anthony Bourdain, and the idea of traveling around the world to enjoy various foods, and that food is entertainment, right? And it will change the way that Dungeons & Dragons players and many other people as well look at food, and it will also challenge them about what they eat, what they choose to eat, and what they choose to eat, and what is really going to be part of their diets, and also it will challenge the idea of what a city person eats and what a suburban person eats, and what heartland Americans eat, and what West and East Coast American eat. So Gordon Ramsay will be a very, very important part of how food is looked at in 1994. Okay, all right. Now, what is our artifact for 1994? Well, our artifact in 1994 is a CD It is Weezer's In the Garage. All right, now Weezer will be one of the groups that is changing how music sounds in 1994. And Weezer will specifically have a relationship to Dungeons & Dragons. It will be talked about directly in multiple of their songs. And also, this is continuing that so there's a connection between Dungeons & Dragons celebrity, and there's a strong connection between Dungeons & Dragons and popular and even independent music, right? And here Weezer is bringing up the fact that they play Dungeons & Dragons on this major album, which changes rock and roll and changes pop. And Weezer will really change what people think music is for, how it should sound, all of that. And Weezer is connected to Dungeons & Dragons, and their album, their CD album, is our artifact for 1994. What is our relationship for 1994 for Dungeons & Dragons? Well, that relationship is for justice, okay? So one of the things that's interesting is when players play Dungeons & Dragons, they play powerful adventurers, okay? At first to fourth level, maybe you don't have a ton of power, but you're even more, you're more powerful even at first level than most of the people you run across within the Dungeons & Dragons worlds, right? Within those settings, right? But once you hit 5th, 8th, 12th, 16th, 20th level, you are playing some incredibly powerful characters, right? And these characters will witness things. Now, they'll go into dungeons, and they'll come across goblins, right? And the goblins will simply attack them right out of the gate, right? There's no justice really being talked about there. But when your character goes back and they go to sell the goods, the treasures that they found in the dungeon, right? And they're coming across the street, and they see a pickpocket pick a merchant's pocket, right? They have the power to catch that cut purse, right? They have the power to kill that cut purse for what just happened. They have the power to keep the cut purse, to wait, follow the cut purse, and go and take that person's take the wallet from the cut purse that was just taken and keep it for themselves. Or they have the power to return it to the merchant, right? And so then they have the question of justice will often sit very directly with players. And when they come across something, when they come across a situation where sentient beings are saying this should be this way and this should be that way, it's not a hypothetical question. They literally have the power to deliver justice, deny justice, or be indifferent to justice. And all of those are clear choices. And so for the first time in America, right, for one of the first times in America, low millions of American junior high kids, high school kids, college students, adults are saying, what does justice look like if I had the power to deliver justice? What justice would I deliver? This is a huge question, right? Like, so when we previously, when we saw things that dealt with justice in art, that was a viewer's experience, right? When we read about justice in books, that was a reader's experience, right? But Dungeons & Dragons is interactive, and it's saying, hey, here's this situation of wrong that's right in front of you. What would you do? And so for the first time, when they have the choice to deliver justice, to deny justice, to be indifferent to any justice being delivered, right? These people are finding out if they had that choice, right? What would they choose? And this is hugely important because this question hasn't really even been asked to most people, right? So Dungeons & Dragons has this relationship to justice, and players who are in Dungeons & Dragons games for any extended period of time will be asked, what is your take on what should be done when justice is needed? It's a huge, huge, wonderful, beautiful aspect of the game that people don't really think about that often, but it's really, really fascinating. That is a clear history of the 21st year of Dungeons & Dragons history, 1994. I'd love to know your thoughts on all this content for 1994 and Dungeons & Dragons and what that year was like for the history of Dungeons & Dragons. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful day.